Hi, everybody. I'm Natalie Day, an implementation specialist here at Quill, and I'm so excited to be walking you all through Quill's newest tool, Reading for Evidence. So let's dive in. Since Quill's inception in 2014, we have been focused on building and improving free online tools for teachers to use to help students develop as writers, especially at the sentence level. And most recently, we were really excited to move into the reading instruction space with our Reading for Evidence activities. We know that the best writing instruction is embedded in content, and creating activities embedded in content comes with many interesting questions, like what kinds of text should be used? At what reading level should these texts be? How will we support students with reading the text? And of course, what is the highest impact writing task we can ask students to do with the text? And how can we provide the most targeted feedback to students during the task? I'm going to do a demo of a Reading for Evidence activity in just a bit, but here's a brief overview of what happens in a Reading for Evidence activity. Students will read a nonfiction text of 500 to 700 words, and these texts are relevant to multiple content areas, particularly English, social studies, and science. And they're written at an 8th or ninth grade reading level. After they've read the text, students will highlight sentences about a key idea in the text. Then they will complete 3 sentences about the key idea using evidence from the text. And while students are writing, Quill will provide targeted feedback so that the students can revise their sentences and make them stronger. Now, before we jump into the demo, let's talk about the strategy on which Reading for Evidence is based. So, Reading for Evidence activities use a writing strategy in which students complete sentences using evidence from the text, using the joining words because, but, and so. Students use because to provide a reason or cause, but to provide a contrast, change of direction, or counterpoint, and so to provide a result or effect. So what does this look like in your class? Students will see a stem like, extended school days can benefit students. Then they will be prompted to complete 3 sentences using each joining word. In completing these sentences, they will have to think about a reason why extended school days benefit students when using because, a contrast to the benefit of extended school days when using but, and a result or effect of the benefit of extended school days when using so. This seemingly simple activity is doing so much simultaneously. Students' content knowledge and reading comprehension are being assessed as well as deepened. Students are being challenged to think in a multidimensional way about the idea in the sentence stems, as well as think through important logical relationships. And with the joining words because and so, students think about cause and effect. And with the joining word but, they think about a claim and a counterclaim, which is a central aspect of argumentative writing. All right, let's get into a demo of a Reading for Evidence activity. If students are completing a Reading for Evidence activity for the first, second, or third time, they will see some introductory pages that introduce them to Reading for Evidence, and they'll be able to click the next buttons to move through these introductory pages. These pages communicate to students that they'll be receiving feedback from Quill and that their teacher will see their score and responses. Once they've seen all of the introductory pages, they will click the Start button to start the activity. The first section in a Reading for Evidence activity involves reading and highlighting the text. In this case, the task is highlighting 2 sentences that describe how seaweed can reduce the impact that cowbirds have on the environment. So now I'm going to read the text and highlight 2 sentences about that key idea. Once students have read the text and completed the task, they will click the Done button and the Next button to move on to the next section of the activity, during which they will complete sentence stems using evidence from the text. The directions are that we have to use information exclusively from the text, and we have to put the information in our own words, which means we cannot use quotes or plagiarize. So the first sentence stem is the because stem. Feeding cows seaweed can reduce the impact cowbirds have on the environment because, and I'm going to complete the sentence stem by writing, they cause global warming. When I click the Get Feedback button, I see that my response is incorrectly focused on the impact of cow burps rather than the effect of feeding cows seaweed, so I'm told to try again. In addition, below the feedback, I see a hint which shows me the function of the word because. So instead, let's write, feeding cows seaweed can reduce the impact cow burps have on the environment because it can decrease the methane they produce. When I click the Get Feedback button, I see that I'm correctly talking about the impact of feeding cows seaweed, but my response is still not specific enough. So here you are seeing a hallmark of reading for evidence, because reading for evidence will always encourage students to be as precise as possible. So instead, let's write, it can decrease the methane they produce by a lot. When I click the Get Feedback button, I still see the feedback that my response is still not specific enough. So I see the feedback to reread the highlighted text to find a specific percentage. So notice something here. The scaffolding of the text being highlighted has only appeared when I've missed the specificity that the tool is looking for more than once. So the tool recognizes the scale of how much a student might be struggling and provides different levels of scaffolding based on the scale. So now I'm going to reread the highlighted text and see the percentage that the tool wants me to include. So instead of by a lot, I'll write by 99%. And when I click the Get Feedback button, I now see that my response is strong and that I've correctly used information from the text. I want to call your attention to this number in the lower left corner of the response field. So for each sentence stem, students have up to 5 attempts to submit a correct response. And if they don't submit a correct response by the 5th attempt, they will be automatically moved on to the next sentence stem. This limit of 5 attempts is purposeful because we want students to get enough practice, but we don't want them to get overly frustrated or stuck on a sentence stem. So now I'm going to click the Next button and move on to the But stem. Again, we have the same stem of feeding cows seaweed can reduce the impact cow burps have on the environment. However, now we have the joining word but. So let's write, feeding cows seaweed can reduce the impact cow burps have on the environment, but there is currently not enough Asparagopsis seaweed available to feed all of the cows around the world. When I click the Get Feedback button, I see that my idea is correct, but this is plagiarism because this is a direct quotation from the text. So students will be discouraged from incorporating direct quotations in reading for evidence activities. I do want to note that when writing essays, direct quotations are an important part, but this is not the focus of reading for evidence. So when reading for evidence, students will be encouraged to paraphrase. And beneath the feedback, I also see a hint of how I might paraphrase the text. So let's rewrite, There isn't enough Asparagopsis seaweed for every cow. And when I click the Get Feedback button, I now see that I've written a strong response. Another thing that I want to point out here is this Report a Problem link that students can click if they believe that a specific piece of feedback is off. Clicking this link will prompt the student to give feedback, and our curriculum team will be automatically notified of their feedback. Now I'm going to click the next button and move on to the last stem, which is the sow stem. So feeding cows seaweed can reduce the impact cow burps have on the environment, so we should make more seaweed. When I click the Get Feedback button, I see the feedback that discourages me from drawing conclusions or making claims based on opinions. Rather, I am encouraged to stick to the evidence in the text. And I want to recognize here that as teachers, you might want your students to draw their own conclusions from the text they read. But when completing reading for evidence activities, Quill wants students to focus on evidence-based writing that pulls evidence from the text. So let's rewrite. Companies around the world are growing seaweed. And when I click the Get Feedback button, I'm sure that you all have noticed that I've deliberately misspelled seaweed. And now that I've demonstrated that I understand the text and that I've paraphrased, Quill is focusing on my mechanics. So Quill will prioritize the student first getting the idea right and paraphrasing before pointing out any errors in mechanics. So let's spell seaweed correctly and rewrite. Companies around the world are growing seaweed. And when I click the Get Feedback button, I see that I've done a nice job and submitted a strong response. And now we've completed this reading for evidence activity. I'm going to click the Done button. And when students finish a reading for evidence activity, they will be brought to this page that celebrates them for making all of the revisions that they did. And that gives them a chance to compare their own responses to some other strong responses. So this is a really great page to leverage for class discussion. When students click the last Next button, they will be able to provide their overall feedback on the activity, which is really helpful to us at Quill, but I do want to note that providing this feedback is optional, so students can always click this skip link. And lastly, when a student completes a reading for evidence activity, they will see this page that shows them their proficiency and percentage score they earned on the reading for evidence activity. When they click the View Results button, they will be able to see even more information about their performance. And for each writing stem, they will see each of their responses, as well as each of the pieces of feedback they received. And finally, to return to the To-Do Activities page in their Quill account, they will click this All Activities button in the upper left corner of the page. And when teachers navigate to a student's activity analysis for a reading for evidence activity, they will similarly see each of the responses the student submitted and the feedback they received for each writing stem. All right, now let's take a look at the two pathways that you can take to assign a reading for evidence activity. Firstly, you can assign a reading for evidence activity from Quill's activity library. So let's go to our Quill account. I'm going to log out of my student account and log into my demo account, demo teacher account. And to get to the activity library, I'm going to click on the Assign Activities tab. and the Explore All Activities in Our Activity Library card. In the library, we'll select the filter for Independent Reading Texts, which will filter the activities so that you only see the Reading for Evidence activities that are available to be assigned. For any of these activities, you can click the drop-down arrow to reveal more information about the activity. In addition, you can click the preview hyperlink to preview the activity and get a better idea about the text that students will be reading and the sentence stems that they will be completing. To assign a Reading for Evidence activity, you will check the box to the left of the activity's name and then click the Assign button in the upper right corner of the page. This will take you to the Review and Assign page, where in the first section you can name the activity pack containing the Reading for Evidence activity. In the second section, you can specify a publish date for the Reading for Evidence activity, and the publish date is the date when the activity will appear in your students' Quill accounts. Optionally, you can set a due date, which you and your students can use for your reference. And lastly, you can see if you have assigned the activity to your students before. So if you have, this icon of a person with a check mark will appear. In the third section, you can choose the classes and students to whom you want to assign the activity. And you can use this drop-down arrow to differentiate and to assign certain Reading for Evidence activities to some students and other Reading for Evidence activities to other students. Once you have completed all 3 steps on the Review and Assign page, you will click the Assign Pack to Classes button in the upper right corner of the page, which will effectively assign the activity pack containing the Reading for Evidence activity to your students. The second way you can assign a Reading for Evidence activity is by assigning a featured or pre-made activity pack of Reading for Evidence activities. To do so, you will again click the Assign Activities tab in your Quill account. Then you will click the Browse Featured Activity Packs card. And on the subsequent page, you will click the Browse Independent Practice Activity Packs. And you'll be able to filter the featured activity packs that you see here by clicking the Reading Text filter, which will allow you to only see the featured activity packs containing Reading for Evidence activities. Each featured activity packs card shows you the activity pack's grade level range, the number of activities in the activity pack, and the estimated amount of time that the activity pack will take students to complete. Clicking on any featured activity pack will bring you to a page with even more information about the featured activity pack. And if you determine that you want to assign this featured activity pack, you will click the Select Pack button in the upper right corner of the page, which will take you to the Review and Assign page to review and assign the activity pack. After you assign a Reading for Evidence activity, you might be wondering how you can introduce Reading for Evidence activities to your students. I would recommend sharing the why. Why are we using these joining words? Why are we using these sentence stems and revising these sentences? Then I would share that Reading for Evidence is a new tool that uses artificial intelligence. And I would explain that because the feedback and Reading for Evidence activities is powered by AI or artificial intelligence, the feedback will occasionally be off. So if students do receive feedback that they find confusing or incorrect, please encourage them to let us know, either through the Report a Problem hyperlink or through the survey at the end of the activity, because this will help our curriculum team to train the AI algorithm to be as accurate as possible. You can also let students know that each activity's feedback gets more accurate and precise as more students complete it because their responses are retraining and improving the AI algorithm. You can also let students know that they will be scaffolded to write sentences that are evidence-based, specific, and original. And it can be helpful to discuss with students what each of these mean for these particular activities. Evidence-based means that students will be discouraged from drawing conclusions or making claims. Specific means that students may give an accurate response, but they might still be pushed for further specificity. And original means that students will be discouraged from incorporating direct quotations. And finally, let students know that in reading for evidence activities, mistakes are opportunities for growth. We want these activities to be a sandbox for students to develop and experiment as readers, writers, and thinkers. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact support@quill.org, and our support team will be happy to address your questions. In addition, please check out our articles in our support center for answers to technical questions and our articles in our teacher center for pedagogical tips and best practices. Thank you so much, everybody.